Hi there, and welcome to Ancestral Recall. I'm your host, Eli Kaplan. Today, we're going to look at one of the most abstract yet classical concepts in fantasy, the elemental. Elementals are energy of the source material, gaining cohesiveness and the ability to fight. The original elementals came from Greek mythology and were staples of many D&D campaigns in the 70s and 80s as allies or enemies. They were the generic creature that wizards, and some druids and clerics, could summon to fight for them. While the original elementals were based on fire, water, earth, and wind, there are other concepts that could be made incarnate and fight, and I'm not talking about hearts. Jokes about Mati. They never get old. There are currently 358 different elemental cards in Magic. That's a ton, so here's the criteria to make it onto the list. The card must have seen some sort of significant play in Constructed and hopefully Limited. Cooler cards are obviously going to have an advantage. Also, no more than 2 choices from Lorwyn, the set which is well known for having a metric crap ton of superb elementals, particularly with Evoke, a mechanic that lets you play them like spells at a discount, though they still trigger comes into play in death triggers as well. Someday, I'll get to Lorwyn, though it's going to be a while. This is an extremely harsh restriction, but if it wasn't there, I'd have one set get probably half or more of the picks. The one thing I want to mention about this list is that I do try to get every color represented on top 10 lists when I can, but when black has other ethereal type creatures such as ghosts, horrors, banshees, spirits, and some of the demons, it's hard to get them into elementals. White also suffers the same problem thanks to angels and spirits. The list definitely has a red, blue, and green bias. Red and blue usually get the classical elements, while green gets embodiments of nature. In fact, green has the most elementals overall, despite blue and red getting them in ABU. So with that out of the way, let's get to the list. Number 10. Maelstrom Wanderer. This incarnation of the disruption at the heart of Alara is incredibly powerful, bringing not 1 but 2 huge cascades. This is an amazing commander, and I'm glad Wizards gave it the nod by reprinting it in foil as well. It's incredibly specific to one plane though, so I don't want to put Maelstrom Wanderer too high on the list. Number 9. Voice of Resurgence, a very powerful nature spirit that hates things happening at the wrong time. This life spirit can just wreck so many different archetypes, especially blue archetypes, and it gets to replace itself when it dies. Spitting out tokens in multiplayer that can get huge are definitely powerful. The flavor of this elemental is the reblossoming of nature amidst the urban sprawl of Ravnica. Number 8. Multani, Morrow Sorcerer. This guy's the best Morrow out there, counting up how many cards all players have. Couple that with Shroud, and in multiplayer you have a giant untargetable fatty. This is a very simple, yet highly effective beatstick, and it's a shame that Multani isn't getting a lot of play these days. Number 7. Whisperwood Elemental. Despite this guy being the newest card on the list, I feel like this guy's free manifest technology, plus its ability to react to mass removal, will make it a must-have in many casual EDH and cube decks for years to come. Manifest is just a fun ability, and the random amounts of extreme value that can have sometimes when creatures flip means that it's a legitimate threat. I may be a historian, so I try not to make it my business to be a prognosticator, but I think there's a lot of future potential with this guy. Number 6. Fulminator Mage. The bright, vivid hearts of Lorwyn's Flamekin turn to miserable, gloomy cinders in Shadowmoor. Fulminator Mage's ability to take out a non-basic land has turned it into a modern staple, but the flavor doesn't feel particularly distinctive. But perhaps that's the point. This is a major tempo play, and if you can find some way to recur its ability, such as with Sun Titan, you can play merry hell with mana bases. Number 5. Skullbriar, the Walking Grave. This guy just breaks all the rules, because when Skullbriar leaves play for the graveyard, exiled, or command zone, he gets to keep all his +1/+1 counters. The only way he relinquishes his power is when he goes to the library or gets bounced, and that's incredibly cool and powerful. Number 4. Lord of Extinction. There are many creatures that count specific card types in the graveyard following the path of Ice Age's Lurgoyf. Lord of Extinction is the guy who chooses not to discriminate and just counts cards in all graveyards. In group games, this guy is guaranteed to be ginormous. Extinction is sadly a phenomenon of nature as well as death, so I'm gonna feel that it's a perfectly flavored green-black card. Number 3. Horde of Notions. This is the legendary elemental of Lorwyn. Yes, playing this creature on turn 5 is hard, but replaying any elemental from the graveyard, particularly in Lorwyn where so many of them have amazing come-into-play abilities, entering the battlefield abilities, made this guy well worth the trouble of harnessing all 5 colors. This is a great choice for an EDH general and gives people tons of options. That's exactly what I want out of my generals. Number 2. Muldrifter. In decks with any serious amount of recursion technology, this elemental has room for so much potential. You can play it as a divination for 3 mana, getting coming into play and death trigger the boot. It draws you 2 cards. Tack on 2 mana and you get a 2/2 flyer. The number of times this gets cast for the full amount is more than you might think. In the heyday of fairies with Lorwyn Standard, this often got included in fairy decks despite not even being in the proper tribe. As a high pick in Lorwyn and Modern Masters draft, it's put many a player into blue. And the art of Flying Fish Eel is just gorgeous. And yet, as awesome as this common is, it's still only number 2 on the list. Before we get to number 1, let's just take a second to recognize our honorable mentions. Revelark. This reanimation doesn't feel like an elemental to me, it's more of a spirit type card. This is very powerful. The guy had a huge impact on block, standard, and yeah, it sees a bit of modern play, but it doesn't feel like an elemental to me, so that's why I didn't put Revelark on the list. Avenger of Zendikar. A sweet 1-card army that gets bigger and bigger over time. That feels like the Wrath of Nature, yes? Landfall is a very powerful mechanic, and this guy showcased its power in the color that loves hitting its land drops the most. Ashling the Pilgrim. Simply put, she goes boom. A very red creature, and the best fire elemental in the game. There's no question why she's a very popular mono-red commander. Vigor, also from Lorwyn. Vigor is an incarnation as well as an elemental, and prevents damage and makes the rest of your squad bigger. The only reason it's not on the list is the rules. If you know the stories of Jamie Wakefield, one of the best Magic writers of all time, then you know how much he loves Verdant Force. And if you're relatively new to the game and want to read some classic tournament reports from the old days, go read Jamie Wakefield's archive, as they are some of the best contemporary accounts of Mirage and Tempest blocks. Wakefield is a hell of a writer. Verdant Force is the first elemental to see major tournament play. But, moving on, and the number 1 most awesome elemental in Magic the Gathering is... number 1. Animar, Soul of Elements. Yes, it's true that Animar doesn't do a lot outside EDH, but of all the concepts of elementals, this guy is the most unique. It's an elemental of elementals, the essence of the world. Light and dark don't bother Animar. It gets bigger as your army increases, and Animar makes the rest of your army cheaper to play. Animar can enable Eldrazi to hit the table for free. Animar is an incredibly obnoxious general to play against, but the synergy that this guy offers and the flavor are just so insanely tempting, you can't say no. And that's why I'm going to argue that Animar is the best elemental in Magic. Thanks for watching this top 10 list. If you enjoyed it, please like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And share this with your friends. Even if your list is entirely different, and I imagine it very well could be, this list should give you some points to bounce your own ideas off of. This is Eli Kaplan for Ancestral Recall, signing off. Good games, and good luck.